Thank you everyone so much for joining us for this professor panel hosted by the Cornell Undergraduate Research Board's Peer Mentorship Program. I'm so immensely excited to have everyone here and an amazing panel of 5 different professors in such diverse fields. It's really a massive privilege to have everyone here and for these professors to donate their precious time to help us educate people with undergraduate research. My name is RC and I'm a junior biological science major. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Peer Mentorship Program. And I just wanted to start off with some introductions. I have the rest of PMP introduce themselves and then our amazing professors as well. So Victoria can go ahead if you want.
Hi everyone, my name is Victoria Catalan. I am a junior chemistry and chemical biology major at Cornell, one of the co-chairs of PMP. I've been here for a couple of years and I'm super excited to be hosting this panel for the first time.
And I am the other co-chair. My name's Phil. I'm a senior biology major. My lab is the Memory Neuroscience Research Lab. I was a mentor a year ago. I'm the co-chair right now. And now we can have the professors address themselves.
Yeah, so yeah, if we have our wonderful professors introduce themselves in any order, that's fine. Yep.
Oh, I should go first?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Okay, my name is Liz Kellogg. I'm in the Department of Molecular Biology and Genetics, and my lab focuses on using single particle cryo-electron microscopy to reveal the function of macromolecular complexes that serve to organize the genome.
Hey, hi, I'm Sturt Manning. I'm an archaeologist, so I run excavation projects in places like the Mediterranean and Cyprus, and I also direct the Cornell Tree Ring Laboratory. So we do that all year, and we have undergrads working in the lab on tree rings, looking in terms of dating and climate. And we also, in fact, use SEMs and microscopy as part of that in order to do identifications of species and things.
Hi, my name is Brian Lucas. I'm an assistant professor of organizational behavior in the Industrial and Labor Relations School. So my research looks at the psychology of behavior in the workplace. So we look at things like how people make judgments about themselves and other people at work, and we use methodologies like surveys, experiments, and field experiments.
Hi, I'm Lena Kourkoutis from Applied and Engineering Physics, and I don't know how you managed to do this, but you got the 3rd electron microscopist on the panel. I do electron microscopy at the atomic scale, so I try to understand how materials, crystals, and devices work atom by atom. And so we use some of the most powerful microscopes actually in the world, which are right in the basement of PSB.
Hi, I'm Andrew Bass, and I'm in neurobiology and behavior. And I'm a behavioral neuroscientist who is interested in how the brain essentially controls different types of behaviors. And specifically, my interests are in the use of sound for communication purposes, both how we generate sound, for example, how I'm speaking to all of you now, as well as how we hear sound, which is our sense of hearing. But I study it in fishes, and fish, there are lots of fish that use sound to communicate with each other. And those are my model systems.
Amazing. As you can see, such a diverse panel of professors and so grateful that they could donate their time to be here. So we're gonna just jump into some prepared questions that we have here. And yeah, so the first question. A lot of people, especially in the program, through my interactions with the mentees in our Peer Mentorship Program, this is definitely a big question. Is there a right time to join a research lab to get involved? And when, I'd love to hear all of your opinions on when will be sort of a right time, or when should people start to get involved?
Well, I'm happy to start that off.
Yeah.
I'll just kick it off. I do a lot of that. For me, I typically advise students who, when they first come to Cornell, that really during their first year, they should really get a good handle on their coursework and other activities and just really adapt to the transition of going to college. And that the beginning of their sophomore year is a good time to get involved in research. Now, the exceptions to those are off sometimes, which I've had freshmen in my lab also, And typically those are individuals though who've been lucky enough to have had research experiences already, actually during high school, either during the summer or at other times. That often has to do where they live and other opportunities that are offered to their high school and to the students to actually get involved with researchers at local universities. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to pitch in?
I'll go in. I don't think there's necessarily a right time, because I've had people who've worked on my field projects, archaeology-wise, or in the Dendro lab, the whole 4 years they've been here, and it's been fabulous. And I've had people who've joined, literally with 12 months or 18 months to go, and I think they've still benefited greatly. But I would agree generally with Andy. There's a lot to be said for finding your feet at Cornell to begin with. But I think if you aren't looking for something during, e.g. your second year, you're missing out on the opportunity to be part of something special, because yes, you can attend classes and do very well and go to social events and do sport, and it's fabulous. But one of the whole points of being at a university is to see world-class and exciting cutting research going on in front of you and to be part of it. And, particularly for the archaeology, if you come with me, you can't fail to find something new for the first time in 3,500 years, because no one's dug up the site that we're working on since then. So it's that thing, you actually get to touch something and be part of something that is, leading edge and first, it's original.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I feel like I'm getting the sense that it's, for a lot of people, it's very personal, but also it's good to, take some time to get your foundation at Cornell before starting to really dive in. So thank you so much for your answers. Definitely amazing. We can go ahead and go on to the next question. So one of the other big questions that people usually start out with when they start looking for these opportunities is where is actually a good way of finding them in terms of, websites or perhaps classes or various postings on campus. And I would love to hear your opinions as to what is like the best way, to go ahead and search for these opportunities. And like Professor Lucas, if you'd like to pitch in first, that'd be amazing.
Sure. I think particularly for the social sciences, one of the best things you can do is kind of just look around the professors' websites. I mean, I'm sure you might have some kind of an idea of at least a field you'd be interested in, or even if you kind of just go look through the popular articles published out in the media, you can usually trace it back to a specific professor. And I would say to look at people's specific websites, because a lot of the labs do have a lot of idiosyncrasies. Like sometimes people are on sabbatical, sometimes they're looking for students, sometimes they aren't. And so it's usually a case-by-case basis.
So maybe I can chime in. I can really only talk for my department, which is applied and engineering physics. And typically our groups have opportunities for undergrads available. Sometimes we don't post them. So I think reaching out to the faculty, I think exploring websites and just getting an idea of what people are working on is really important. And then really reaching out. I think we'll get later on how to best reach out, but sometimes websites are not fully up to date. We are all busy people. So I think it's definitely good to assume with research intensive groups that they will have some opportunities for undergraduates.
Professor Kellogg, did you want to pitch in on this question? I'd love to hear your opinion.
I mean, so I think everybody handled that question really well. I think that, I think pay attention to what interests you in your coursework. That's how I got started in my first research experience, is to just see what appeals to you in terms of what you're learning now, and then start to look around the department for, the department that you're interested in and websites. Yeah, I think that everybody else handled that. That's exactly what you should do.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah. Go ahead and go on to the next question. So I think we already kind of covered this, but during the normal semester, there will be definitely several ways of reaching out to faculty in terms of emailing or coming to office hours, and I would love to hear particularly your opinion on this matter as well.
So for me, the best way to really learn more about a student's interests and vice versa is to have that one-on-one meeting with them. And that can occur first by any venue. I mean, often I've had experiences in class where someone will come right up to me after lecture, which is always a good way, because then they actually learn more about you and what your lecture style, what you're actually interested in my case as a neuroscientist, and that can pique their interest. And they say, well, what do you study in your lab? But then often I'll get emails, and when I get emails, depending on if their opening is my lab, I'll just set up time to meet with somebody, because often someone may think they want to work in your lab, but when they learn more about it, well, maybe it isn't the best fit for them. But at the same time, I can recommend to them other individuals they may want to contact, because I've learned more, I've gotten deeper into what it is they really want to know about. And so for me, in the end, it's that one-on-one meeting that means the most. And it's good to be persistent with all of us. As Lena said, we all have these incredibly busy schedules, and sometimes you just got to keep emailing somebody if you want, if you really from learning from their website, you say, wow, I really like what they're doing. I want to try to get in there. And persistence does pay off.
Yeah, maybe to follow up on Andy's comment, I think that because we're so busy, I think we want to optimize or maximize what we get out of an interaction. So I like to be contacted, and I think many people in my department, we want an email that is substantial but not long. So you want to convey the most important information. You want to tell us why. I want to see that you have done your research, that you actually have interest in the group. But then ultimately you set up a meeting with the faculty and really discuss and see if there is a way forward for that interaction, because in the end, we want you to be integrated fully in the groups. And so there's to be some understanding, and I think meeting in person is the best way to do that. But you have to first get into the door, and for that, a good email is really the start.
One thing I'd add, actually, of course, is to use other students. We have an undergraduate society in the department, both departments that I'm actively involved in, and they, for example, hold a sort of show and tell that faculty who actually have projects or looking for people come along. So a minor version of this, but the difference is it's much smaller scale, and you know that they're all going to talk about something that you're sort of interested in the sense of an area compared to the whole university. Second of all, I mean, I encourage students, having sent the exploratory email, I often say, well, why don't you just come and drop in the lab during a time where I know that there will be other students there working, and just they can see what's going on. And as I think Andy suggested, there are a few who decide quite quickly it's not actually what they think it is, or it's not what they want to do. And then there are the others who, by the time they've met some people and see what it is, they then determinedly either stay to see you when you're free, or they email again saying, no, I'm serious, I really want to do this. And by that stage, you sort of think, well, it's definitely worth having a meeting with them, because these people are actually interested.
Yeah, just to add on to that point, and to link it to a previous comment, a lot of times the TAs in your introductory course to that topic are probably going to be PhD students in that area, or other students who are very interested, that have gotten involved in research. So oftentimes, yeah, a good step could be to reach out to TAs.
And just to follow up with that point, given the altered circumstances of this semester, is there anything in particular that has changed in a lot of labs in terms of onboarding students? I think a lot of people would love to hear about that specifically.
Yeah, I mean, this really depends on the labs, right? You can imagine there's already a big hurdle to get grad students in the lab. I mean, they are now all in the lab, but even with our first year grad student, it was a struggle to get them back in and training everyone. So, okay, let me back up. It depends whether you do experiment or theory or simulation. So yes, typically we still have, I think all of us understand that we have to adjust to the current situation. We're going to be in this situation for a while longer. And most of the faculty have now adjusted so that we can support undergraduate students, even if it's an experimental group. But it means that the options for projects are a little bit different. Before, when I would train a student operating an electron microscope, that might not be the case right now, because there's no chance for us to do that effectively. But you should not be discouraged. I think all of us now is a good time, because we know we have to deal with the situation.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the biggest things during this search is definitely persistence, and also given circumstances. I know a lot of people are pretty discouraged, but it sounds like there's still a lot of opportunities out there for people who really want them. Yeah, so we go on to the next question. So this is a really big one that I would love to hear all your opinions on. What are some qualities that you look for in undergrads looking to join your labs?
Enthusiasm and a willingness to learn, I think.
I think there's a point that Lena brought up in the last response to the last question, which is they show they've actually really looked into the work you do. So for example, maybe read, as best as they can, look at a paper that your lab has written. So it's very easy. Most labs have on their website, we all list at least some recent publications from the lab. But then again, it's so easy to do a Google search these days as well. But I look for that as well. Like, how much did you really look into what we do just by reading?
I mean, in what I do in terms of field work, and that tends to be a mainly summer thing, the one thing you can guarantee is it's not all fun in the sense of you're meant to rough it a bit. It involves outdoors. It means not always being comfortable. So as Andy says, to have done a little research so you don't come along basically wondering which hotel we're staying in because you in fact haven't looked to see that we're going to be up a mountain looking for some of the oldest trees in the world, is going to have me going, well, this person hasn't actually taken this seriously. Whereas you come the other way and you know something about what's happening and you're basically going to start telling me how you just love looking for some particular tree or old thing somewhere else that you've already been, you've immediately got the person's attention because you've shown an interest in the topic and you've researched enough to know what it is you'd be doing if you came and worked.
Maybe I can also add that typically you have a huge field here of different faculty from different colleges. But I think in general, undergrads either work with other undergrads or with graduate students and postdocs. And that means we want people to be able to be part of a team, right? Whether it's a two-person, two-student team, or it's a larger group. So I think that's why these one-on-one meetings are important, to just at least for 50 minutes get a sense of that, if that person will fit in. And I agree with Liz, which is that we want people to be excited. We want to see that they will get something out of it, and we are happy to support them in that mission of learning about research.
Professor Lucas, did you want to chime in on this one? I'd love to hear what you look for specifically.
I completely agree with what the others have said. I think enthusiasm and motivation is typically a big one. I guess to plug the field of organizational behavior, conscientiousness is a big trait that we look for. That's one of the qualities that have been known to predict job performance in a lot of different industries. So kind of organization, and particularly where that helps too, is knowing what kind of a time commitment you can provide.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it's really great to hear straight from professors themselves about what they look for. I think a lot of people are quite unsure when they get to this stage. So these are just amazing. So thank you. Yeah, so go on to the next question here. So what are some mistakes that you see undergrads commit when looking to get involved in research?
To send a two-liner email that says, I'm interested in your research, can I come talk to you? That way, if you don't get a response, then that's the biggest mistake, probably.
I agree with Lena totally. It's either that or something that is completely, like, you can tell it's a form letter that they've sent to a lot of different people. Then that's probably not going to get a whole lot of my attention.
it's also a mistake to think that we're only looking for people who are experts already. I mean, some of the best people I've had come work for me knew 1%, maybe even 0 when they started off, but they were excited, they're enthusiastic, and it was obvious if they wanted to, they were going to be great. Because, I mean, one of the things to bear in mind, and I'm sure it applies to everybody, I mean, what the lab is doing is my career, and it's stuff that's meant to be world-class, and it's my reputation on the line if anything happens that isn't good. So you're really looking for people who are going to be part of buying into being part of a fabulous project. You're not looking for somebody who necessarily thinks they know everything or will do a bad job. You want somebody who's trainable. So it's more important to be enthusiastic and want to do it than to not necessarily know how to do it to start with.
I think, what I'm curious about is if many undergrads are reluctant to contact professors about research because they don't feel they have a high enough GPA. And they think that that's going to be a major impediment to their getting involved in a lab, that we're going to immediately want to know that, which is not the case.
Professor Lucas, did you have anything to pitch in for this question? Any mistakes that you have seen in your personal experience?
In terms of the reaching out side, I agree with what's been said again. One of the other things I tend to see is like kind of once you're first starting to get working into a lab is that you can kind of see some students start to adopt the entrepreneurial mindset. So be proactive about problem solving and getting involved in the research, whereas others still kind of take a student learning mindset, like almost kind of like how you might absorb lecture content. And so it's really the former, the ones that are proactive and kind of treat it like an entrepreneurship, almost like working through a project. It's kind of like building a business. Those are the ones that I see tend to do better in these environments.
There's one more thing I could add, which is, at least it's my style at least. I think students often will come and talk to you and they think they're immediately going to get into and doing their own project. And I know I've never worked that way because I've always found the best thing is either the student works directly with me on something I'm already doing, or they work with a grad student or postdoc in my lab to first learn. And it's a way of our learning more about that individual and vice versa. And don't expect when you come into a lab, oh, you're gonna have your own independent research right away. I don't think that typically often, that doesn't happen very often that I know of.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your answers. Definitely extremely insightful. Yeah, so we can go on to the next question. So something that bothers a lot of people, I think, in my experience, is the big question of whether previous research experience is important. So I just wanted to really quickly touch upon this very specific question and hear all of your opinions on this.
So I was going to say no, because again, many individuals have different life experiences and what they've had, the opportunities they've had before they got to Cornell. And so we shouldn't be using that as a metric we would use to determine who we are going to let in or not let in. It's all the other things that everyone's discussed that are really very important. Yeah, previous research experience, absolutely. I mean, do I love being able to recruit someone who worked in a neuroscience lab previously and has experience? Yeah, because they already know what they're getting into. But I would never use that as a major determining factor. And I never have used that.
So there's one time where sometimes it's useful to have previous research experiences, which is typically during the summer. And there was a question in the chat already. You can stay here, but typically you go somewhere else to explore a different university potentially. And so sometimes it's easier because there are huge application pools, maybe 500 people for 20 slots. And so then there is a little bit of a competition, right? And so having some experiences at your home institution, which is Cornell for you, is useful. But if you're looking for research at Cornell, I think that we all understand that many of you haven't had any research experiences, and we don't expect it. And what I should also say is we are all flexible to give you a project that is more aligned with what a first-year grad student can do or what a freshman can do. We can adjust, right? And so depending on your experience, we will adjust the project.
Yeah, so definitely what I'm getting and been getting throughout this panel is that pre-research experience is not something that most professors look for at all. And obviously the things that we covered previously, like persistence and enthusiasm matter a lot more. So it's amazing.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I just add in, I mean, it's trust and integrity is probably, you know, the most important thing. Lots of what we do involves effectively recording things or observing things or being responsible for something, whether it be an instrument or data set. If you can't buy into the culture of the lab, which is we do things properly, the whole thing collapses. So really, you don't need experience to do that. That's a personal characteristic which you either bring to the project and you bring to your life, and it's a really important one, or you don't. And if you've got that, I think it really is not important at all. But Lena makes a very good point. If you then apply for some fellowship or something at another institution or some open competition, you know, the Smithsonian or whatever, yes, obviously then it helps to have already done something at Cornell to be in the running to get such an external opportunity.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your answers. I mean, it's great, definitely, to, this is a question that obviously a lot of people struggle with. So it's really nice to hear straight from professors themselves about this matter. Yeah. So this is something that we also touched upon in our conversations previously, but I wanted to know, I guess, more freeform, more specifically, whether it's, you know, reading papers or perhaps taking one of your classes. How can people show interest in your research?
I think quite simply, just, I mean, ask questions. You know, if you're curious about anything, don't be afraid to ask. And I think that's probably, I also enjoyed the discussions it opens too.
One thing I read in this question is one way to show genuine interest in research is to actually have genuine interest in the research. And so my suggestion there would be to look at the research of a lot of different faculty. So don't just pick one out and then think, well, I have to pursue this one. You could look around and see, like, maybe there are some research topics that are better fits for your interest than others.
Yeah, I mean, the way I read this question was, if you email, we always want to see that you show genuine interest in our research. To me, it does not actually mean that you have to read 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or more papers that came out of my group. I actually expect 0. What I want to see is that you have an idea what the group does, and maybe you can say, oh, this area looks more interesting. For example, my group works on, you know, condensed matter physics, batteries, and some biology. I mean, you better know, you know, which area of those 3 you're interested in. And don't make the mistake of copying content from the website either, right? I mean, I only say that because I've seen all of this before. So I think genuine interest just means that, you know, like, is there an interesting thing that came up with some question that you had, and just say, oh, this looked so interesting, so cool. That's I think all I expect.
I think taking a class is one of the easiest ways to try and, you know, achieve this goal. I mean, one of the better people I've had in the last few years, I remember was an Ithaca College student, and the fact that they made the effort to actually come and take my class, which is not as simple the way that buses and things work. In fact, it's one of the mysteries of Ithaca, how it can be so difficult to get between the 2 campuses. But the fact they'd done that alone already had me interested in them. And then when, you know, about a month later, I get the request to have a meeting to discuss possible research, of course, you're already basically ready to say yes at that point, and they don't even have to sell themselves very hard. So that's the easiest thing to do, is to come, be interested, perform well, and the professor's already perhaps hoping that you're going to be interested.
Yeah, we in our program, we sent out actually a Google form. This is perhaps one of the most asked questions, and everybody actually asked this question in this exact same way. So I think it shows a lot that people, you know, struggle a lot with this as well. And it's amazing to hear all your opinions on this as well. Yeah, so we can go ahead and move on to the next question. So this is something that is more directed, I believe, towards Professor Lucas and Manning, and something that we've seen in the past years, I think, in our peer mentorship program. and also I think has been recognized on a university level of that a lot of people, when they think about research, they tend to think specifically in STEM. And I just wanted to touch upon this while we have this panel, extremely diverse panel, and just to hear about some perhaps similarities and also differences in research in these different disciplines.
I'll just chime in here just because of a broad view I have. I actually think those differences are becoming less and less because for each of us, the process of digging deep into a particular question shares so many features. There are times when you work very independently, and there are other times when you work very much with a team. But by the same token, I think that more and more actually disciplines, there's a lot of overlap in disciplines that's actually driven by the technology that's out there that's available these days. And it's really a lot of the technology that people in Lena's field and Lena developed that really have begun to pervade so many other disciplines because of questions you want to ask. I remember the first experience when I started more to realize this maybe was, so there's someone named Sol Gruner who's a physicist at Cornell, but working with actually colleagues of Lena's, they build new kinds of microscopes and new ways of what I'd say seeing the invisible. And I remember Sol getting involved they got involved in this project of looking at old paintings, but seeing what's really below the surface of those paintings that no one was able to see before. And that opened my eyes, and I know for Sturt's field for sure, where imaging is so important. Those technologies are discovered by people in physical sciences, and those of us in biology and social sciences and the humanities, I would say, we all adopt those things because suddenly they enable us to do things we never imagined we'd be able to do. So I'll just start it off that way if I can.
Yeah, I was going to add, I thought you might ask me about this because I'm the social scientist here, but unfortunately I don't do STEM research, so I don't know exactly how to contrast them. But one thing I can point out though is that one thing that you'd want to think about just in terms of getting involved in your research is how you actually like to spend your time. So all the different fields are very different, and there are exceptions, but some fields tend to spend more of their time doing some things than others. So for instance, like some of the STEM fields tend to be more in a laboratory. If you're doing something, for instance, in the social sciences or like political science, maybe you're out actually knocking on doors, or maybe you're actually out at a field site. So you might think about what are the actual types of tasks and environments you actually like to be in, and think about if the research you're going to get into is the type of research that actually spends its time doing that.
I would just say that during term, normal term, because obviously this semester has been challenging, as they say, it's lab work in my case, which is not a million miles away from the science things in the sense that it involves using software, it involves using microscopes, etc. But during the summer, the sort of research that I and a number of my colleagues do means going and spending 4 or 6 weeks in some little village or camp somewhere, and you're going to be working literally, well, dawn to when it's dark, doing an archaeological project and doing things like using a shovel and a pick, which is often, it turns out, the first time students have ever encountered these high-tech implements, because nobody does their own gardening or anything these days, it seems to turn out. So it's a chance to engage with some physical work, which is not always encountered in modern day life. And you get to work with people who actually live in the areas. So we have, it's part of our commitment to be part of the community there. We work with local communities, so you get to meet and spend time with people who are not, from the US, not from a college educated background necessarily, may in fact be, a genuine farmer and this type of thing. So you have the chance to meet the rest of the world and people from the rest of the world. So I think that's one of the huge, differences with some of the social science humanities projects. But there'll be many scientists now saying, but we go to Kenya and we study a particular fish in a lake and you get the same benefits. So field projects, I think, may be the comparison here versus lab projects.
Well, my lab does both, like Sturt's in it for different reasons. But I think the thing that makes me think about, so there's a growing area known as the Environmental Humanities. And these are individuals who have, and please, any of my colleagues correct me if they think I'm wrong in this interpretation, but these are individuals who clearly have an interest in the environment, in maybe issues related to sustainability, et cetera. And they interface with others, with scientists in the physical sciences, the life sciences, the social sciences, et cetera. But take that information and are able to synthesize it to communicate it to others in a different sort of medium. And I hope I'm not being too obscure with that, but you could think about things like digital art or even performance. And to be able to do that properly, you do need some knowledge of what did those individuals actually do. And so I think that's what I mean by the lines are becoming blurred more and more, that to really have that scholarship in any of these areas can begin to interface with any of the other areas, depending on how broad your landscape is that you're asking your question and what you really want to be able to do with that. What do you really want to do with the information you collect, actually? We each have a lot to learn from each other's disciplines about an effective way to do that. Because communication with a broad audience is what needs to be done by all of us more than ever. And so those are my reflections. Again, I'm thinking in another way perhaps, but those are my reflections on this question.
Thank you all so much. I mean, definitely super interesting conversation. And then actually, this is the last prepared question we have, and we'll transition to a Q&A after this. So this is a question that we actually also got a lot of. This is a very, obviously could be a broad question, but also something that we touched upon previously. And aside from, I guess, things that are more obvious in terms of, making sure that, lab time expectations that were set are being met. How does one thrive during their research experience and, develop a good relationship?
Getting regular feedback is essential. And that means regular meetings with the researcher or with the grad student or the postdoc you're working with. You shouldn't be given some assignment, you go off and do it. You constantly need that feedback. And I saw in parentheses, you'd have, how do I keep my PI professor happy? And I'll put it back to you. It is a two-way street. We want you to be happy also, because if you're not satisfied with your experience, the experience is not going to be fruitful for you. It's not going to be fruitful for the PI. So there is a bit of a two-way street there. We want feedback from you also. You need to let us know what it is you like or don't like about what you're doing, what isn't going well, because that's how a team works together.
You kind of brushed this off, which is meeting, the time, deliverables. I don't think you should brush it off, because it's actually quite difficult, right? There comes prelim time and you become busy, and then you drop off for a month or so, and then you come back, and that's not good. I think you need to carefully think about how much time you can commit. And we are all flexible, right? If there's a really busy time in the year, just be open, reach out, and let us know. So I think that just meeting what we expect, I think is really good. And and then, how do you make the professor happy? I think often you work with a grad student or a postdoc, You definitely want to make them happy, but also you don't make them happy. I think it is basically a joint project, right? We want to see that we can benefit from each other. But it's really nice to see, you know, new ideas coming up, and they will come up. Even in your first year, you might have an idea, share it. I think it's great to see. I think we love to see success.
I mean, typically you're going to know if it's going well because the other students who are there, it will be clear that you're part of the group and it's working well. I mean, my experience, you know, I've very rarely had to be the one to explain to a student that they're not doing what's needed to be a success in the team. That usually comes from the rest of the team telling the person they need to lift their game, or they need to, you know, think of another direction to, you know, pursue. So if you join the team and become part of it, you'll quickly realize that you're doing what's required, because you'll see that you're doing everything that everybody else expects.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely great to hear. And does anyone else want to pitch in on this last prepared question before we transition to the Q&A? Right. Okay, I think, yeah, so thank you all so much for taking the time to answer these questions. I think we can open up the floor for some questions for the audience as well. If you're an attendee, I know there's an option to submit your questions, so feel free to do so. And we'll begin just pulling some out and answering them live. And yeah, thank you so much to our amazing panel professors for taking the time to answer these questions and to help us, you know, spread awareness about undergraduate research. It's amazing to hear, you know, firsthand experiences and also just a lot of perspective as well. So thank you so much. Yeah, so go ahead and start typing your questions and we'll start highlighting them and answering them.
Yeah, so just to preface, we do have a good number of questions, but limited time. So hopefully we'll be able to get to all of them. So if we kind of zoom by a little bit, hopefully that's okay. So the first question is, how would we apply to be part of your research? I think it was touched on a lot about like emailing. Are there any other ways, or what is the most effective way, especially during these times?
I mean, in my opinion, I think an email is really good. If you provide the information I need to make an initial assessment whether I want to reach out to you. So I think that's key. And again, as everyone else said, we will then have one-on-one meetings with you. Often I see that if you have a connection with the faculty, that helps. So if you have taken their class, that can be useful, but it doesn't have to be. So I think email is good.
Something I should have mentioned earlier, you should include a resume with your email.
Perfect. Yeah, the Peer Mentorship Program definitely goes over that. So yeah, there are a lot of attendees in that program. So please definitely listen to the professor's advice, because that is what we've been also advocating for as well. So our next question is, what is the right time for sophomore transfer students to get involved with research and or apply to get involved with research in Cornell?
I don't know if I understand the question quite right. There's never a right time. Maybe if you're asking when is the right time to ask for research positions for the next semester, maybe they can clarify the question.
Yeah, I think what they mean is if you're starting out as a freshman, you probably have more opportunities to reach out to professors earlier on. But if you are a sophomore transfer student and just getting adjusted to Cornell, should they try to get involved with research to kind of catch up with the same timeline as incoming freshmen at Cornell, or should they wait to get adjusted to college as well?
I strongly recommend, like Andy started off, you need to get adjusted first. You know, I teach a freshman course, and I have gotten probably, 5 students who came to me within the first week to ask for research. It's just not going to happen, right? Because we don't know if you can adjust that quickly. We want you to get used to the situation, and that's why you're holding this panel in October, right? Which makes sense. I think the same is true for sophomore and transfer students. Just give it a little bit time, see how you adjust to the Cornell environment. And in the end, it doesn't make a difference whether you, reach out as someone who joined Cornell as a freshman or as a sophomore. There will be opportunities for you.
Perfect, thank you.
I was just going to say, this is something to also talk to advisors about, because that's one of the functions that they fulfill, and they may be able to help point you in the right direction, because some sorts of opportunities, in summer, for example, there will be a deadline. You have to sort of be part of an application, or you've missed out for the whole year. Other things, it's perfectly okay to apply at any time during the year. So that's where an advisor could probably in 5 minutes say, yes, I know you have to apply early for that because that Cornell program has a deadline of 1 November or 1 October. Or no, I think you should just see Professor so-and-so after you've taken the class for the semester and see how it goes.
If no one else has anything to say, okay, we will move on to the next question. What is the best way for new students to find research during the pandemic, since they don't know any professors and can't meet with them in person?
I think it's not different at all, actually. I think that you're exposed maybe you're pointing out that you don't get to meet them one-on-one in, after a lecture, but don't worry, just reach out, send an email. There are also more opportunities to listen to seminars. You might not understand the full seminar, but you can listen to the first half hour. More and more things go online, so maybe you can explore other opportunities. And then if you want to learn more about research and you don't want to reach out to the professor, feel free to email a grad student in the group. I think everyone is happy to answer questions. They might be more responsive if you don't hear right away from the professor.
I could say two things about that. One is that I think a silver lining of this whole COVID thing has been that there's probably a far larger group of faculty now who are used to using electronic media to communicate. Zooming is just a natural part of our lives every day now, whether we're teaching, meeting with people in our lab, having faculty meetings, whatever it is. And I think that there was always a group, maybe of faculty, who were reluctant to use that on a regular basis. And that's just all changed by necessity. And so that it's sort of, Lena touched upon it. Actually, things haven't changed. We're at a point now where things are actually sort of similar to the way they were before. I mean, we can Zoom and have a first discussion as much as any meeting in our office. I think on the other hand, though, and this was mentioned earlier as well, that each of us, I know I've had to think about this. It's been especially challenging with new graduate students coming in. What are we going to do in our labs now to adapt to the current situation? Because we still have a lot of passion for what we do. We have people that are coming to us who want to do things. And I think we as faculty are actually learning about new ways of, or different approaches to our research, especially, I mean, at least in our labs, our postdocs and graduate students are there on a fairly regular basis. They may be on a particular schedule, and you have to understand this has all been very carefully orchestrated. We all write protocols for who will be in our lab at any one time, how long they'll be there, et cetera, to be as safe as possible. But at the same time, that creates a new set of needs for everyone. And I think we're learning how to best meet those needs through a Zoom medium, and learning, okay, I've always had undergrads in my lab. I have. What am I going to do now? And I'm trying to think of new ways to integrate them into the whole process. So it's very much a learning thing on both sides at the moment. But the first thing to do is meet each other. And if our motivation is enough, we're going to figure out a way to get you involved.
Yeah, just to add to that, I know at least for my department that I can speak to, I know that usually a lot of us are traveling, like going back and forth between the city, going to different places. We're all pretty much just here in Ithaca now, so you could email us.
you have a captive audience, huh?
The one thing I'd add is, and more or less what Andy's saying, we've all been trying to think of creative new ideas. So, I mean, for example, in my lab, we've been scanning quite a few samples and then been using various software solutions to try and measure from scans. In fact, it's relatively inventive. We're going to write a little article about how we found a new way of actually studying Byzantine church architecture entirely digitally, basically. So it's not that you can't get involved, and faculty are busy trying to find new and interesting things to do, some of which will be a disaster. I mean, it won't actually work particularly well. Others actually turn out to be a really good idea. We'll keep doing, afterwards.
Thank you guys so much for your input on that. How have your labs transitioned remotely?
Well, I can just say I have frequent meetings, one-on-one meetings, as well as group meetings with people in my lab every week so that we all stay in touch in that manner, because we're limited in how much time we can spend with each other physically. And again, it's sort of like what was alluded to. I don't know. It's actually turned out to be very effective and helpful, and it's not as much fun for me personally. I'm used to just walking in and out of my lab all the time to see what's going on. Yeah, you just Zoom a lot. In some ways we stay in some ways I stay, it's because of what Brian said in part. We are traveling less and going elsewhere. And so in a way, it's just like with other things in our lives, we're spending a lot more time actually talking with the people around us.
Would anyone else like to finish answering this question, or are we good to move on?
There's one question that came in, I think that's particularly good, and I'd love for people to touch on, is that in terms of doing research, perhaps in a different major or in a different school that you're currently in, I'd love to hear your opinions on that. Perhaps maybe a biology major getting involved in history research, or physics, or a biology major doing physics work. So I'd love to hear your opinions on that.
Who wants to take that one?
I was going to say, usually very popular. I mean, just picking me and my interests. I mean, one of the things we do is geophysics during the summer. So obviously somebody comes from, well, sometimes they come from geological sciences, but they can also come from engineering or physics. I've had a student of Sol Brunner, the same one mentioned earlier, years ago, come. Usually it's a challenge because often they arrive fairly convinced they can do the whole thing much better. Sometimes this turns out to be the case. Sometimes it turns out that many other people have thought how to do it beforehand, and the solution that we're working with isn't quite so bad as they think when they show up. Computer science majors are popular in almost every lab because the one thing you can guarantee is that no lab's software setup is perfect, because by definition, it needs to change virtually on a daily basis, because so there's always space to fit in. And vice versa, people who do more creative things, ranging even down to people from the art school, they've come with me on my archaeology project, and I had one who ended up doing a senior project, which was basically representations of the past as experienced in the present, which was the team doing the work. They were like the studio artist on the project. It was great fun.
Yeah, so for us, maybe it's a little bit different because it's a transfer into physics or applied physics. And also one needs to think about, for the experimental group, there are only limited number of slots. And so, as a freshman, as a sophomore, sometimes you're not affiliated yet. I would certainly ask what major you're planning on affiliating with. And if I'm honest, I would give preference to someone who's interested in the major, because we want to support the students in our major, right? It doesn't mean it's a no-go. If you're in a different, for example, we have lots of students in arts and sciences that transition over, or they are doing physics. I have students in my group that are physicists and not in engineering. But that probably would be it. Larger transfer is a little bit more harder to justify. But I would love to hear the history students in my group. So maybe I can think of a project.
Thank you guys. Someone else has something to say. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask Professor Lucas, have you had, I would love to hear your opinion. Have you had a lot of students who have come from different disciplines come and do research for you, or is it something less less common? And what would be your take, I guess, in Maine?
Yeah, so personally, I haven't, but that's, I think, only just because I've only been at Cornell for a couple of years. I think it is common, and I think it's probably a little easier for someone who wants to go from a STEM field to do research in the social sciences, typically because there are fewer barriers to entry. So, if you've ever, been in a social situation and wondered why someone did something, you're an intuitive psychologist. You're already on track to start answering psychology related questions. So in that sense, there are a lot of people from different fields that end up finding interest in the social sciences, like psychology and sociology.
Great. Our next question is, so we talked about the that it's not as important to have an incredibly high GPA or things like that, but what about prerequisite courses for the research that a student would like to conduct in each of your labs or groups?
Well, I guess usually I would give preference to the student who has at least taken my Introduction to Dendrochronology course, because it seems like a little bit of a driving license if you're going to be allowed to get set loose on the samples and the equipment. For field collections though, no, I mean, there's no prerequisite other than the fact that we discuss the physical requirements of what's involved and the fact that they're going to commit to do it. And really you're looking for the enthusiasm and interest rather than a special skill, because everybody, apart from probably the professor and the graduate students who've done it before, is going to be learning, because no one's ever climbed that particular mountain or been in that place. And in many cases, nobody in the group has been to that particular place. Well, that's the whole point of the expedition.
I mean, for me, I of course hope that students have taken some course in biology or in the process of taking courses in biology. And Cornell certainly has plenty of those. As many of you probably know, I mean, the biology major at Cornell is pretty rigorous. It has a lot of requirements. And so I just look to see, yeah, what biology courses have they already taken? But also, and understanding more what their experiences were like from high school.
Yeah, I would say rather than prerequisites, I would have courses that would probably be helpful for you to take concurrently. So it would be great if you've taken the Intro to Organizational Behavior course, but if not, if you find yourself interested in the research, you could certainly take that course while at the same time getting involved. And then as you advance, some things like social statistics, but those are things you can do as you go. They don't necessarily have to be prerequisites to start.
Okay, so I think at this point, we've kind of hit our time limit. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's been an amazing experience to have you all here to speak about undergraduate research experience with us and answer a lot of the questions that different people have had about research here. And yeah, I guess if anybody has any closing remarks about undergrad research experience in general, if they would like to voice, send me, that's welcome. Yeah, does anybody have any last words to say, I guess?
I think enjoy your time at Cornell and explore the opportunities. Sometimes you will be surprised all the interesting things that are going on that you might not even know about. I don't know much about the work from Sturt and Brian, for example. So I wish I had the chance to just go and see what their labs are doing. Be open to new ideas.
And along those lines, to encourage you and all of your friends, just reach out to faculty more in general, whether it's in a class or not just interest in research, but reach out to your professors. And I think there's never been enough of that done at Cornell, actually. You don't just go see a professor because you have a problem. in a class. You should just reach out to them because you're curious about something you've heard in the class, for example. And I think that goes along with research and reaching out to us and learning. But in general, we're all here. The reason we're all here at a place like Cornell is because we're interested in working and teaching undergraduates. Otherwise, we'd be at some other kind of institution.
Okay, well, if no one else has anything to add, I just wanted to say again, thank you so much to everyone who, all the attendees, all the panelists, definitely. We had a phenomenal group of panelists joining us from all different research fields and offered so many, good pieces of advice. And just, it was just amazing to hear all of your opinions and all of your advice on the undergraduate research experience. And thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to all the attendees for joining us as well. The video recording will actually be sent out afterwards as well to everyone for your records as well. And like I said, if everybody could join me in virtual round of applause, if you will, for our panel. Thank you all so much for donating your time and answering all of our questions. And yeah, thank you all so much. And please have a good rest of your day and check out our website, cornell.edu, if you'd like to hear more about CURB in general. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again to our panel of professors. It was really amazing. Like I said, I keep saying, but it was really amazing to hear from all of you. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.